Can we have candy? Can we have?
They have like that sixth sense. Like it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It's like as soon as you start to.
There's that crinkly wrapper sound.
Yeah, it's like they just come from nowhere. You're like, where were you? I called you like 5 times like 10 minutes ago.
Yep. Some of nobody ever hears me when I say dinner. Come on down for dinner, guys. It's dinner time. But if I pull a candy wrapper out like this, can we have some candy? Can we have some candy?
No, eat your broccoli first.
Yeah.
Lily wanted more cinnamon rolls. And so no, you gotta eat your ants first. So she went over, she started doing handfuls. 1, 2, because she would do the whole like how old you are, how many bites. 1, 2, 3, and then walk back over and say, can I have more cinnamon roll?
I will continue this conversation.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's yours.
Joining us, Will?
No.
Yeah.
Come on down.
Not yet.
Well, take it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Will.
Hey. So just want to let you know the camera is streaming this one.
Oh, that one. Okay.
So you'll go on the second YouTube channel.
Okay.
We did a test.
So don't take your notes.
We did a test on Wednesday night.
Okay. I'm so nervous now. I've never been on camera before.
yeah, these are Skittles jokes.
Yeah. Yeah, now it's on the internet. It's recorded, it's on the internet.
Ooh.
Everybody will know that you.
Ooh.
Everybody will know that pretty much in this class I'm right on the edge of you know, my jokes are just kind of like right on the edge of, ooh, he took that one almost too far.
So that's the red box.
So I just need to not go right.
Really, that was for you.
Okay.
You can widen that out, Will.
Yeah, I can. If you want to come over this way, I can widen that out.
I noticed.
No, I don't ever walk over.
That's not true. I noticed on Wednesday he definitely walked over there.
Walt was quick to clap back there. No, that's not true.
So now we have.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, it was. That was kind of just a good coincidence about the song this morning.
That was great coincidence. I mean, I actually wasn't gonna bring it up, but as we were singing, I was like, this is really appropriate to my lesson. So I marked it real quick and just took my book up there with me. So we can act like it was on purpose. Yeah. They'll never know behind the curtain. They'll never know.
Except the people watching.
Oh yeah.
That's true. I heard a whole conversation about muffins on Wednesday.
Oh yeah?
About what between your wife and my wife and Shastine.
It's a whole conversation about muffins. What? Huh? Okay, so you know we do have to figure this out. Is which muffin is best? Lemon poppy seed.
Oh, that is good.
Blueberry.
Blueberry is also
Blueberry.
Blueberry is classic.
It is classic.
It is. You know, blueberry is to muffins what like the hamburger is to American cuisine. Like everybody loves a hamburger. It's classic. Muffins are. I don't know anyone who doesn't like a blueberry muffin. But if I had a blueberry muffin and a lemon poppy seed, I'm picking the lemon. Walt would pick both. I'm taking the lemon poppy seed every single time.
The double chocolate.
Double chocolate from Costco. Yeah.
It's too much like a cupcake.
It is. It's too desserty.
Well, I'm gonna want to. I like scones.
I love scones.
Scones.
We're on the same wavelength. Scones are great.
Because then you can almost feel like it's healthy because it's not a muffin.
Well,
No.
Who's running on the board?
No.
Hey.
They're crumbly. They're dry.
Oh, they're perfect.
It's a scone. A scone is like a dry biscuit wearing a colorful scarf. That's what it is. It's a dry biscuit wearing a colorful scarf, saying, "I'm
like, that's
fancy."
what I feel like.
No,
That's why I
you're a
relate to
dry.
scones.
You're a dry biscuit with some blueberries on it.
You haven't had good scones. The scones I had are like super dry.
I should have brought you one.
No,
They're basically
it's
muffin
it's
tops.
a dry biscuit wearing a scarf, trying to convince you it's fancy. That's all.
Well, at least we can all compromise and just say donuts are better than everything.
Donuts reign supreme.
It's a
Yes,
Gibson donut.
donuts reign supreme.
Hey Ron, have you ever been to? It's a little town just close to Biloxi, but they have tater nuts.
Tater
It's donuts, but it's made out of potato
Oh.
stuff. But it's good. It's really good. They're called tato nuts.
That does sound good. Like I like potato bread. You know,
My wife's grandma.
it's
makes,
the flour is it's made from
Well,
potato
it's not like a
flour.
potato. It doesn't look like a potato. It doesn't
Yeah,
taste like a
it's-
potato.
It's just like
it's
a
like a nut.
dense donut.
Yeah, it's awesome.
The potato flour can be very light and fluffy.
I'm gonna say that sounds like something that would not work, but also something that you would taste and it would be amazing.
It's amazing.
I need to try this.
You need to try potato bread. I can't believe you haven't tried
Potato bread is
bread.
very
I've never heard of potato bread.
Bread's excellent.
It's fantastic. That's all my dad eats now.
Well, we know what we're doing Wednesday night. We'll bring the scones,
kind of like-
potato
Yeah.
bread.
It's like camping. Bring me out of my shell.
Oh, that's
My sister, for her birthday, she loves potatoes.
Yeah.
So she had a potato party. Everything had to have potato in it. Every piece of the meal.
It's like an
My grandma
episode of
made
Chopped.
potato donuts.
Yeah, it is like an episode of Chopped, isn't it? Every one of your courses has to have a potato element to it.
Yep.
Yeah, potatoes are good. I'm a big fan of potatoes. I like a good potato. I like, the garlic and rosemary roasted potatoes, little red
Oh, yeah.
potatoes. Oh, that's just great. It's great. Curly fries from Arby's.
Sometimes when you go to Arby's and you're like, we're out of cream.
What Arby's do you go to?
Your Arby's.
The Arby's by our house is not good. It's not a good
That's
Arby's.
not a great one.
Can you tell I didn't eat
Well-
breakfast today? Did not eat breakfast. Actually, let's be real. Even if I had eaten breakfast, we would be having this exact same conversation. Word for word, this conversation would have unfolded exactly the same way.
All right, now my theory is that the reason Jeremiah was so upset is because he got the red bag of Skittles.
Yeah.
That's all they had back then. It's just.
Are we live now?
Yes.
Yes, we are live. Yes. This is
Deep
all
theological
live.
insights from him.
Hey, all I got from you, you know what I got from you, so.
You want to fight?
Whatever chapters 9 and 10. I think it's less than 8.
Just kidding, we don't fight here. We're
Yeah. We are on lesson 7, chapters 9 and 10. Let's go ahead and get going here. I feel like maybe we're a little thin this morning,
does feel
which just surprised me because it felt like we had a good number for our 9 o'clock hour. But sometimes this kind of how the numbers work out. So we're in lesson 7. That's page 36. We're in Jeremiah chapters 9 and 10. Kevin, would you say an opening word of prayer for us, please?
Lord Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for another beautiful day that you blessed us with. We thank you now for this time that we had come together and study your word, learn more from your prophet Jeremiah, the struggles that he went through trying to convey your word to his people of his time, and learn some things about how we can communicate with the people of our time, how we can draw our strength from you, and be good servants. I pray for those who are sick, or are not able to be here, that you would bring them back to us soon and take care of them. I'll also pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
So we start the chapter 9, verse 1. We start off with a couple of verses here that give us some emotional insight into Jeremiah as a man who was deeply invested in his work, deeply invested in the people that surrounded him. Some prophets, Jonah, for example, they prophesied out of spite. Jonah had no love for the Ninevites. I mean, it's obvious. Like, even in the end, even after As he was preaching for their repentance, he was hoping for their condemnation. Jeremiah does not preach out of spite. Now, clearly he goes to some very dark places. There's a lot of anger in what he writes. He's disappointed. He's frustrated. He's been persecuted and abused. And so he doesn't necessarily write from like a lovey-dovey, warm and fuzzy feelings place. But there's no doubting that Jeremiah was like deeply, deeply emotionally invested in the people that surrounded him and the outcome of his prophesying and preaching. And these first couple of verses really show that. Take a look at verse 1 and 2. Oh, that my head were waters, and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. Oh, that I had in the desert a wayfarer's lodging place, that I might leave my people and go from them, for all of them are adulterers, an assembly of treacherous men. Verse 3. They bend their tongue like their bow. Lies and not truth prevail in the land, for they proceed from evil to evil, and they do not know me, declares the Lord. So in those first couple of verses in particular, this statement, I wish that my head, almost like he's saying, I wish that my head was like, maybe in modern language, I wish that my head was like a water tower, right? We see water towers all over town, right? They help to provide water pressure for our plumbing and everything. I wish that my head was like a great big water tower, just full of water, so that I could just turn the faucet on and the water could come streaming out. It's almost like his eyes are dry because he's cried all of his tears. And I wish that my head were like waters and my eyes a fountain of tears, so that I could just weep day and night. And I will say from our experience the last couple of weeks with Stephen's passing, that, you do reach a point, like when you're grieving for someone really close to you, you reach a point where you're just out of tears. You just can't cry anymore. The tears stop. And I don't know, maybe someone who's much more familiar with the human body than me could say, do your tear ducts actually like run out at some point? I don't know if that literally happens, but maybe you've experienced it where just at some point you just go, I'm out of tears. I just have no tears left. That's basically what Jeremiah is saying, is I'm just out of tears. I wish that I had a lake in my head so that I could keep crying because nothing else is coming out of these eyes. Oh, that I had in the desert a wayfarer's lodging place. I wish that I had some quiet, lonely place that I could go and just be alone. That's a lot of times what you want when you're deeply, deeply saddened by something, is just, I want alone time. I wish that I had just a place where I could go, just a wayfarer's lodging place, just a shack in the woods that I could just hide from the world and not look at people and not be around people. I wish that I had that. For all of them are adulterers, an assembly of treacherous men. That's very difficult to bear. I don't have any specific question to ask you, some deep insight on that. I just think this is an amazing little couple of verses there that show how invested he was. Do you have any comments along those lines before we move on?
Google says no, your tears can't run out.
What's that?
Google says no, your tears can't run out.
Okay, good job. Thank you, Google. Yes. The almighty internet hath spoken. Well, that makes sense. I'm sure that it would be impossible for you to cry at a rate that was faster than the regeneration of moisture in basically one of the most regularly hydrated places on your body, right? So yeah, that makes sense. So you can't run out of tears. Maybe it's more an emotional thing that you kind of, after crying and crying and crying, you've had such a catharsis that that natural response to your grief just kind of comes to a head and ends. But then God adds there in verses 3 through 6, and this is what it is, right? This is why Jeremiah's heart was so broken. In verses 3 through 6, he uses the words lying and deceit multiple times. Take a look at, if you like to mark in your Bible, count the number of times that he brings out lying, deceit, and dishonesty in some fashion in 3 through 6. They bend their tongue. Lies and not truth prevail in the land. That's verse 3. Verse 4 says, do not trust your brother. Every brother deals craftily, right? That's dishonesty. Verse 5, everyone deceives his brother and does not speak truth. They have taught their tongue to speak lies. Okay? Verse 6, your dwelling is in the midst of deceit. Through deceit, they refuse to know me. Over and over and over and over again, it is a lack of truth. It is a bending into deceit and lies that seems to be kind of at the core of this problem. I think if you can be an honest person, you can fix a lot of things in your life. Like if you can be honest about the impact of a sexual sin on your life and your marriage, if you can be honest about that, that's a huge first step in fixing it. If you can be honest about the level to which you're addicted to something, like just being honest about an addiction is a great first step in moving out of that addiction, right? Changing your life, changing your behaviors. Like just being honest about your sin is a huge, huge first step in dealing with your sin. But dishonesty seems to be one of the core problems of the people in verses 3 through 6.
This is running rampant here, evidently.
Yeah, just the fact that it's over and over. It's like, don't even trust your brother. You can't trust your brother. You can't trust your neighbor. They're all lying. They're all deceiving. They only speak lies. No one can trust each other anymore. I don't think our society has reached that point at all. I'm a fairly trusting person, and I do think in spite of all the... If you watched the news all day long, you probably would be a really, really unhappy person. But if you can kind of get away from like cable news and get out in the real world, I do think there's a lot of honest people out there. There's a lot of good people out there. But we do have to be aware of this, that a society that does not know how to grapple with truth any longer is a society that's not long for this world. Like if you can't grapple with like basic truths anymore, and truth bothers you, and you're not able to bear it when truth comes out, I think you're a society that's just not long for history, not long for this world anymore. Yeah, Mark.
I just want to know what I should do, because I found 2 homeless people asleep in my front of my apartment.
Okay.
And over where I live, there are numerous homeless people because they get turned out by the prison farm.
Oh, okay.
And I got a complaint in my book, and what you preached this morning told me not to do it.
Okay.
What should I do?
What about homeless people in your...
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was homeless 3 times.
Yeah.
And I wish at that time somebody would not have done it to me.
Yeah. Well, I would draw from your own personal experiences and think about what you wish others had done for you when you were in that position. Do that. What others did to you that was harmful, work at fighting against that. I always recommend to people as well, provide material assistance as you can. We can only help people as far as we can help them. You can't help beyond your means, but you can help within your means. And you can't save everybody also. Like, if I was to take my personal wealth, whatever it happens to be, speaking hypothetically, and I was going to say, I'm going to try and help every single homeless person in the city of Memphis. Well, if my wealth was divided evenly, split evenly with every homeless person, I would just basically be handing 50 cents to every homeless person, because I don't have that much wealth, and there are too many homeless people. And so you help those who are right in front of you. You help those who are, help your neighbor, take care of your neighbor. I can't help the homeless person who's 20 miles away, but maybe I can help the homeless person who's right in front of me. Try to offer material assistance instead of money. That's my other recommendation. Don't give money to people, but if someone's hungry, give them food. If someone's thirsty, give them a drink. If someone's cold, give them a blanket. You can go to Walgreens or CVS and, buy a blanket for $5 and give it to people. That's what I do. We take the kids out, a couple times a year. We make little gift bags with clean socks and a blanket and bottles of water and granola bars. We just hand them out to, a dozen or so homeless people that we find in downtown Memphis. You can't help everybody, but you can help that person that day. My other recommendation is, if you're going to donate money to an organization and not an individual, right? Because an organization, like a homeless shelter, will be able to utilize that money better, right? They'll actually be able to institutionally utilize that money and effectively use it in a community, rather than maybe you give money to a homeless person and you don't know what's going to happen to that money. But I know if I give money to a homeless shelter or to a charitable organization, if I give money, I know exactly where my money's going and it's going to be utilized. So those are my recommendations. Good question. Yeah. Let's skip on ahead to, let's go to verse 12. Okay, let's go on ahead to verse 12 just for the sake of time. Can I get a volunteer to read 12 through 16? Who'd like to do that for me? Chapter 9, 12 through 16. Kurt, will you do that for me?
Who is the wise man who may understand this? And who is he to whom the mouth of the Lord has spoken, that he may declare it? Why does the land perish and burn up like a wilderness, so that no one can pass through? The Lord said, because they have forsaken my law, which I have set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, nor walked according to it. But they have walked according to the dictates of their own hearts, and after the Baals, which their fathers taught them. Therefore, says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I will feed them, this people, with wormwood, and give them water of gall to drink. I will scatter them also among the Gentiles, whom neither they nor their fathers have known. And I will send a sword after them until I have consumed them.
Okay, a couple of things that I want to point out. It appears that verse 12 is Jeremiah asking. Right? Verse 12, there's no, I know that in English we've got quotation marks and everything, and editors have made those decisions along the way about how to use punctuation in the Old Testament. But presumably verse 12 this is Jeremiah kind of despondently saying, I'm doing all this preaching, you're asking me to go prophesy, I'm going to Jerusalem and telling them, Jerusalem, he says in verse 11, Jerusalem is going to be a heap of ruins, a haunt of jackals, a city of desolation without inhabitant. I'm supposed to go preach this to people, and he says in verse 12, well, who's wise enough to understand this? Because I'm not finding very many wise people anymore. I'm not finding people who will listen to the Lord's word. I am not finding people who have any interest in the future. And so our land is going to be ruined. Our land is going to be a heap, and I just don't find people interested anymore. And so God's answer is, well, they've forsaken the law. And I think maybe what he's saying is, they made that choice a long time ago. Right? This is not a today problem. Jeremiah, this is not a problem that was created today, and this is not a problem that you're going to fix today. This was a long time ago problem. They made a choice not to follow my law. They made a choice not to follow after my words. They've walked after the stubbornness of their heart. Verse 14 says, as their fathers taught them. Quick practical application. I know this isn't the main point of this chapter, but what just stood out to me is the influence that we have over our kids. Multi-generational either faith or multi-generational apostasy and corruption. We have a lot of influence over our kids. Now, they're, of course, going to be judged for their own choices, right? If you walk in the stubbornness of your own heart, you'll be judged for walking in the stubbornness of your own heart. But verse 14 does point out, as their fathers taught them. We're all judged as individuals. We will all stand or fall at the judgment seat of Christ by ourselves as individuals for what we have done in the flesh. But, where do we trace that back? We trace it back to, was I taught truth by my parents? Or was I given the path of falsehood by my parents? And it's up to me what I'm going to do with those things, and I'm going to be judged for what I do with that. But as their fathers taught them, I just take that to heart. I can't blame my dad for how my life turns out. I also can't look at my dad and say, well, because he was a Christian, that automatically makes me a Christian. But what I can learn is, what is my influence on my own kids? What are they learning from me? Bad habits. Dad's got a temper. Dad's a real grumpy man. Dad doesn't study his Bible. We don't ever see Dad praying. Dad doesn't make worship a priority. Dad doesn't make morality a priority. Things are right or wrong because Dad thinks they're right or wrong, not because they're objectively, morally, divinely right and wrong. Right? So what am I teaching my kids? Kevin, do you have a thought?
It reminds me a little bit of at the end of Joshua, as he makes his great proclamation about, me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And then you follow that up with Judges, you know, and it only takes for like one generation
Yeah.
before, you know, things start going off the rails. You know, I mean, these people who just came through the wilderness, they saw everything that happened. You know, they saw the fall of Jericho and all this. You know, and you wonder, like, well, what happened? I mean, and it's exactly this, that, you know, their fathers did not teach them the importance of following the law. You think they would have, but obviously something happened in a generation or two from, you know, from Joshua.
Yeah.
That people, I mean, that's all it took. And you think about you know, us, you're like, oh, that would happen. And you watch it with families all the time. I mean, you know, maybe your parent, you know, the parents were good, and the children were, you know, they came to church, you know, they're okay. But by the time that second generation come around, not even close.
Yeah, I have found, and there are lots of exceptions. I'm not saying this is the rule. I have observed in my lifetime that if parents set kind of the bar right here and are not diligent, the kids almost always kind of are right here, right? And then if these kids with their own kids, they keep the bar here, their kids tend to, I'm just saying there's a tendency that if I'm not really that strong and I don't kind of set the bar high for myself, my kids will look at that and they'll say, well, dad doesn't, you know, Bible study is not a priority to dad. Prayer is not a priority. Spiritual disciplines are not a priority. Meditation is not a priority. You know, dad set the bar kind of here. And if it's not a priority for him, well, it's going to be like this much of a priority for me. But then my kids are going to look at that and go, yeah, dad really, you know, they're going to set the priority here. And so I say set the bar very high for yourself, because what you're trying to do in setting the bar very high for yourself is you're saying, I am aspiring to be better than what I am right now. I'm aspiring to push always higher. I can always pray more deeply, meditate more deeply, study more intently, love more compassionately and more genuinely. And if I'm setting the bar, if I'm aspiring as high as possible, I can pull my kids on up with me as well. So it's never about setting the bar here. We're saying, well, I'm comfortable at this bar. No, I want to set the bar a little higher than that and say, if I aspire higher for myself, I pull my kids up with me and they will aspire higher as well. Again, that's not everybody, that's not everybody's life. I get that. I've observed that in my lifetime. Yeah, Kathy?
Well, I was going to say, like your sermon this morning talking about habits and forming habits. So I think that we actually create that habit for our child. We teach them that habit. So as they get older, that is just out of habit, which, you know, in turn creates good things. But.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I want to jump, before I get to you, Drew, Kevin, you also pointed out Joshua, and it really stands out. If you guys like to highlight or do cross-references or whatever, that reference to Joshua 24 is actually pretty astounding. Like, it's almost like a point for point. Back in Jeremiah 9, he makes this point in verses 13 onward. They have forsaken my law. They've not obeyed my voice. They've not walked according to it. They've walked after the stubbornness of their hearts and after the Baals as their fathers taught them. And that Joshua 24, verses 14 and onward, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and truth. Put away the gods which your fathers, another fathers reference, right? Put away the gods which your fathers served and serve the Lord. And if it's disagreeable in your sight to serve the Lord, well then choose for yourselves who you'll serve. Whether those gods that your fathers served, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's like a pretty amazing parallel from Jeremiah 9 and Joshua 24, because it brings in the concept of multi-generational faithfulness, multi-generational apostasy, your fathers. It brings in serving the Lord with all your heart, and it brings in idol worship. And he mentions the Baal right there in Jeremiah 9. So that's really a good reference. Nice. Very nice, Kevin. Very nice. Yeah, Drew, go ahead.
I just want to emphasize that showing your children how to grow and having that high aspiration is really helpful. I like having the good habits and having that high standard habits. I think also a very important thing to help teach your kids so that they can hopefully one day surpass you in moral excellence and Christ likeness, is teaching them to grow and showing them that you have the need to continue to grow and that they do as well, and that they can figure out that faith and pick up that habit of continuing to grow. Even from a young age, they will continue to go and hopefully surpass you.
So there's like two different models, right? Two different models of this, the expectation we set for our kids. That is a good observation, Drew, very much. Right? There is the bar model, right? Where I've set the bar for myself right here. I am at this point, this is the bar that I've set. I will, whatever it is, I will go to church every Sunday, and I will go to Bible class on Wednesday, and my level of Bible knowledge is exactly where I want it to be. I've learned enough about the Bible that I've somewhat mastered the Bible. That's kind of, it's a static, right? It's static. It says I have reached this level of spiritual maturity. This is the bar, and I want my kids to reach this bar. Okay? Number of times I go to church, number of times I pray, how much I know about the Bible, blah, 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 all those kind of measurable things, right? That's a static thing. Or there is the model of upward growth, where when I'm 20, I know that I'm right about here. Okay? And that's a good spot for being 20. But I want to keep growing. And at 30, I know that I'm right about here. And that's a good spot for being 30. And when I'm 40, I'm right about here. And as you have kids, right, you're going to add those kids along the way, the 25, 30, 35, whatever it is, but however old you are when you have kids, if you choose to have kids and all that sort of thing. But, if you're raising kids, what you're saying to your kids is, it's not about a bar. It's not a static thing. It's not, kids, I'm your dad, and you're going to live up to my standard. It's saying, guys, I'm 30, young father, got young kids. Guys, this is where I'm at right now spiritually. And I'm doing all right, but I'm growing. And I want you to grow with me. And you're pulling your kids along. You're pulling them along for the ride. As you're growing, right, their life also is following a path, right? And so when you are at this point at 20, your kids are right here. When you're at this point at 30, your kids are right here. And the more you keep going up and up and up in your personal growth, you're also pulling them along in their personal growth. And it teaches them the habit that, right, for their whole life, they are growing upward. They are aspiring, right? It's an aspirational model rather than a static model. So it's a great observation, Drew. Really appreciate that. Okay, verse 17. This is an interesting passage here. He's calling for the mourners from Jerusalem to come forth. There were actually professional mourners that you could hire for a funeral, right? And these professional mourners would come out. They knew all the songs. They could sing all the lamentations. They could sing all the dirges. They would lead the funeral processions. It's almost like, I think it's a modern parallel, right, to modern day funeral planning. Basically, call the Gary Taylor. We need the Gary Taylor, right? I don't know what to do. I've never planned a funeral before. Call Gary Taylor. I don't know how many of us at some point have called Gary Taylor to ask him about all these sorts of things. Consider and call for the mourning women that they may come. That's these professional funeral singers. And send for the wailing women that they may come. Let them make haste. I don't want to make light, by the way. I wasn't trying to make light of them at all. Like, this was obviously they took this very seriously. These were people who took their job very, very seriously and considered it an honor and a privilege to be able to come and participate in these funerals or whatever.
Apparently in other cultures they still do that today.
I'm not surprised by that. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. Mm-hmm. It's not a direct parallel, but if you are going to plan a funeral, you do want to be very selective about who participates and when and what they do. What I mean by that is, you know why Gary Taylor is so good at what he does? Because he's had a lot of practice. You know why? Do you know why people ask Gary to lead songs at funerals? Because he's very good at it, and he knows what he's doing. And he can also be distant enough from whoever it is that's passed away that he can stay composed and actually get through the songs. Like, I'm not doing anything for Stephen's funeral. Susan asked me to just read the obituary, which is just, and I said, that's what I can do. I can read a piece of paper, he was born on this day, he had this many kids, this many grandkids, and I can be done and walk away if I just read something on a page. But, you know, we all agreed together, like Ryan should not do the eulogy. Absolutely. And Rebecca even told me, she said, I need a husband that day, not a preacher. So, and there's a reason why. So we called a friend of ours, a preacher in Arizona, and we're doing the funeral in Arizona. We called him and said, hey, you knew Stephen really, really well. Can you do this? And we trust him. He knows what he's doing. We called another guy from the church there who's a song leader. Will you lead the songs? I'm not saying it's a direct parallel, but there are people who know what they're doing and can get through a funeral professionally, compassionately, and stay composed the entire time. And you don't want someone leading songs. We're going to sing I'll Fly Away and go, that does not make for good song leading. Okay, it's not a good song leader. Call for the wailing women. Verse 18. Let them make haste and take up a wailing for us, that our eyes may shed tears and our eyelids flow with water. For a voice of wailing is heard from Zion. Oh, how we are ruined. We are put to great shame. For we have left the land, because they have cast down our dwellings. Now hear the word of the Lord, O you women. Let your ear receive the word of his mouth. Teach your daughters the wailing, and everyone her neighbor a dirge. Dirge is just a fancy word for a funeral song. For death has come up through our windows. It has entered our palaces to cut off the children from the streets, the young men from the town squares. Speak, thus declares the Lord. The corpses of men will fall like dung on the open field, and like the sheaf after the reaper, and nobody will gather them. What's different about this funeral procession, though, is God is calling for the wailing women to come before the tragedy has happened. Right? The city's not destroyed yet. They're not all dead yet. And so by way of prophesying, okay, he's saying, come up here. I need you to sing the wailing song for everybody. Our houses are destroyed. And people look around and go, well, my house is fine. They're dead in the streets. Our children separated from them. Well, no, my family's right here. The corpses have piled up and nobody's there to bury them. Like, well, there's no corpses around here. So it's almost like by way of prophesying, setting the expectation. There is destruction coming. Wailing women, it's time to teach the song to your daughters. Teach them the song so that on the day that it happens, you are ready to sing the song that you've been practicing. You know it's coming. It's coming, it's inevitable, and it's going to be horrible. Get the wailing women ready. Shannon, you have a thought?
Oh.
No?
I've been thinking, I want to go back, but not during this part.
Okay, sorry.
No.
What it is I saw Kurt's hand go up out of the corner of my eye, and I thought I saw it was
No, it wasn't me.
Go ahead, Kurt.
Not on this point.
But it was prophesied. The Lord said, go back to verse 11, which we missed. Didn't read it. I will make Jerusalem a heap of ruins, a den of jackals. I will make the cities of Judah desolate without an inhabitant. And he said earlier, the birds of the heavens and the beast have fled.
Yep.
There's not going to be, I can't picture this sight. I can only picture what is in my head when the last tornadoes went through up in Kentucky, community near Lake Bartlett, or Kentucky Lake rather, not far out of Murray, Dawson Springs. That city is no more.
Yeah.
It's, I saw house after house, laid bare with belongings strewn all over the place in pictures, mile after mile, block after block.
Yeah.
This is that, and there's not going to be anything.
When we were at the 9/11 memorial in New York last week, it's very pretty. I mean, it's all, of course, cleaned up, and it's very, the memorial is an impressive memorial. One of the prettiest, most thoughtfully composed memorials I think I've ever seen. I don't know if you've ever seen it before in pictures or anything. The footprints of the Twin Towers have been left, and each one is a hole going down into the ground, and there's a fountain that just disappears into a hole in the ground. It's beautifully composed, very thoughtfully done. But what we were doing is we were standing there in the square where the memorials, we got our phones up, we were looking at photographs of Ground Zero on 9/11, and we were kind of just looking around at pictures of what it all looked like, going like, okay, there's that building right there, that one. And it wasn't just the Twin Towers. We forget, it wasn't just the Twin Towers. All of the buildings around the Twin Towers, if not totally devastated, were severely damaged, right? It was, just the faces, the facades, the windows, all blown out. It was severe destruction for multiple blocks all around the Twin Towers. And we were just looking at it going just right here where we were standing. Like this pile of rubble in this picture was right here where we were standing. Over here, that building, half of that building was basically just carved off from the aftermath. And we're just looking around. That's kind of what it is total destruction, completely flattened, not one stone on top of another. And it's very hard for us to imagine just that level, that immense level of destruction. Okay, so Shannon, you want to make a point before we move on? Because I think we need to get to chapter 10 before we run out of time.
This is just looking back at what you drew on the board. I was kind of thinking about this even as we were looking at chapter 8 on Wednesday night. I'm sorry, not 8. 7, the indictment of the temple.
Yeah.
And I think that bar standard worship leads to this sort of thing where we're just going through the motions.
Yeah.
And we're easily distracted by the actual acts of worship and study and growth, because we come to church on Wednesday and Sunday, we check the boxes. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of, set a really mediocre standard leads to falling away, which, that Jeremiah is, calling against them. And I think that applies to us.
Yeah.
Very much so. That's all.
Yeah, great point. That actually leads into the last few verses of chapter 9, which we'll get to. Go ahead, Drew. Was that exactly what you were going to say?
Yeah.
Well, it leads right into it. Let not a wise man boast of his wisdom. Let not the mighty man boast of his might. Let not a rich man boast of his riches. That is very much the static, like, I am this wise, I'm going to boast about it. Well, no. At 20, you're only as wise as a 20-year-old can be. There's no boasting in that. At 30, you're only as wise as a 30-year-old can be. There's no boasting in that. At 40, at 50, at 60, like at each phase of life, in this aspirational sense, we just go, listen, I'm only as wise as I can be at this point in my life. I'm wiser than I was yesterday, but I'm not as wise as I'll be tomorrow. And that's wisdom right there. You can't boast about these things, but verse 24, so memorable, we've also, Paul mentioned it to the Corinthians in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. If you're going to boast about something, I love verse 24. And I love the connection to the Corinthian letter. Oh, it's so good. Let him who boasts boast of this, that he understands and knows me, that I am the Lord who exercises loving kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth, for I delight in these things. Behold, he says in verse 25, the days are coming, that I will punish all who are circumcised and yet uncircumcised. Egypt and Judah, Edom and the sons of Ammon and Moab, and all those inhabiting the desert who clip the hair on their temples, for all the nations are uncircumcised. All the house of Israel are uncircumcised of heart. That would be, insulting to say the least, right? For him to be comparing them to Egypt and Judah, or Egypt and Edom and the sons of Ammon and Moab. Like these guys, especially if you look at the Ammonites and the Moabites, these guys were perennial, like multi-generational enemies of Israel and Judah, rivals for resources and political clout. And so for him to compare them and say, listen, you're in the same boat as them. I don't care if you're circumcised or uncircumcised. I don't care about a little, clipping off of a tiny piece of skin. Like, that doesn't matter to me. Now, it matters in the sense that it was a symbol. It was a symbol of God's connection to Israel through circumcision. It was a symbol of the Israelite men devoting and committing their lives to God, right? It's a symbol of something. But the little tiny piece of skin itself, God says, if you're not circumcised in your heart, I don't care. You're as bad as, and he mentions the clipping of the hair on the temples. That's probably a reference to like Leviticus 19, verse 27, where there's this proscription to Israelites that they could not cut their hair or their beards in a way that made them look like the nations surrounding them. We read verses like that and we go, well, God's telling them they can't get a haircut. Like, that's not what it's about. It was about you can't cut your hair in such a way as to look like the Canaanites, right? You're the Israelites. You're God's people. You got to look like it, okay? Don't be trying to model your lives, your hairstyles, your beards, your clothes after the lifestyles of the Canaanites, who are idol worshipers and baby burners and all that sort of thing. Look like Israelites. Look like Israelites. Don't look like Canaanites. And so for him to be saying, guys, you're basically just as bad as the people who clip the hair of their temples. You're basically just as bad as the people who are uncircumcised. And any good Jew in Jerusalem would stroke his beautiful head of Jewish hair and adjust himself down there and go, listen, I've never clipped the hair of my temples, and I'm a proudly circumcised Jewish man. Don't be telling me that I'm like the Egyptians and the Ammonites and the Moabites. Don't be comparing me to that. Does this passage sound familiar? Is a similar statement made anywhere in the New Testament? The answer is yes. You know that. Where is that? There's another passage in the New Testament that makes this same point. It's right on the tip of your tongue, isn't it?
About the circumcised heart?
Yeah, circumcised heart. Romans chapter 2. Is it Romans chapter 2? Yeah. In Romans 2, he makes this very same point about, what God is looking for is not circumcision of the flesh. What he's looking for is circumcision of the heart. Right? And if you're circumcised in the flesh, but not circumcised in the heart, you might as well not be circumcised at all because it doesn't do you any good. This is a shocking thing for God to be saying to people of this audience who would be receiving this message. But what I love is this is another connection, Old Testament to New Testament. These are ideas that New Testament writers, they're just pulling them straight from the Old Testament and making this grand universal application. So that's really, really neat stuff. I bet the bell is about to ring any second now, and we have not even touched chapter 10. If we read the last verse of chapter 10, does that count as us getting through our material?
No.
No, it doesn't. He says there, let's just go ahead and stop there, okay? If you don't mind, read chapter 10. If there is anything from chapter 10 that you really want to talk about, oh man, lesson 8 is 3 chapters.
Jeremiah is a long book.
I know, you can't
But
linger.
you are going to be out of town when? Does Walter have the duty to catch up while you're gone?
Yeah, Walter, sorry. Next Sunday, I forgot to mention.
What are you doing next Sunday?
We are doing Stephen's funeral is next weekend.
Sorry,
Will you be free next Sunday to do class?
I will.
And I'm sorry about that. This has been.
I'm pretty sure he only after one chapter.
So here's the thing. Last time you were like, I'm sorry this is so short notice. Can you teach in a week? And I was like, oh, I expect you to say like on Wednesday. That's not short notice at all.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just, this has been a very weird couple weeks, and things have just sort of piled up, and we decided to do the funeral in Arizona, so now we're spending our entire life savings taking a family of 6 to Arizona, buying last-minute plane tickets, so it would help me out a lot if you thought this. Thank you.
Yes.
We'll get through what we can on Wednesday, okay? We'll try to get as far as we can. Thank you everyone for your comments.
The rest of Jeremiah.
Just cover the rest of the book for me.
It is such a long book, though. You get halfway and you're like, okay, almost done.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's basically saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Over and over.
I'm trying as hard as I can. It's very hard. There's so much I want to say.
Doom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Usually around
Because it's just a reminder.
but it's constant. I mean, not every day.
But you just
But, I mean,
don't
it's
know
like-
when it's going to be like.
Yeah, it's like, and it's usually like hear a song or someone says something or gets brought up. Just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So,
I'm so sorry. Well, I just want you to know, I haven't forgotten. Because I mean, well, I'm just like, it's one of those things where sometimes maybe it's nice and good for